March 2009. Melissa Justice and her husband Ray were coming back from a cruise when Melissa began experiencing pains in her chest.
I was 31, and I just feel like you don't have a lot of aches and pains, so I didn't really think too much of it.
Back home, the pains persisted, and Melissa decided to see a doctor. An ultrasound brought shocking results.
I'll never forget, he said, normal hearts beat like this, and yours is barely doing this.
That initial shock of something's wrong, of something's different, that knowledge that life is never gonna be the same, or potentially never gonna be the same again, is jarring.
The diagnosis, chronic systolic heart failure, a condition where one chamber in the heart can't pump blood effectively. Melissa's heart was functioning at only 15% capacity. They put her on medication, but her best hope of survival was a heart transplant.
Was like being told, you know, you planned this whole future with your husband and this beautiful family that you had in your mind and this beautiful career that you were working on so hard. It was like having everything ripped out from underneath you.
After 3 months of medication, Melissa's heart function had gotten worse, dropping to 7%. Needing more specialized care, she was sent to Ohio State University Hospital.
That's bad heart failure, and that means that you typically aren't able to do things that you used to do, your normal daily activities. It's a life-altering diagnosis. Even though these days we keep a lot of these heart failure patients alive, it's not the same life.
We would wake up every morning and we would give ourselves an entire hour where we would just let ourselves grieve that life that we were losing. After that hour was over, we would come together and we would pray and we would say, you know, we're going to make the best of this day that we can.
Melissa had a heart pump implanted in August of that year. Along the way, Melissa started a blog to chronicle her journey and ask for prayer.
Just tried to trust that God would be with us. I did not feel better. I remember actually thinking, I cannot believe the human body can take this much pain. Kept thinking, maybe tomorrow I'll feel better, but months after the surgery, I still was feeling very rough.
What's the future gonna hold? What's it gonna look like? Will my wife still even be here in 6 months? Will I need to plan a funeral?
After 4 months of little improvement, it seemed a transplant was still the best option. After passing the candidacy test with perfect numbers, Melissa was put at the top of the transplant list, but only for 30 days. On January 10, 2010, the last day of her eligibility, a suitable heart became available. Melissa was wheeled in for surgery that night.
The best case scenario was I was going to get this transplant and it was going to be fantastic. And I was trying to prepare for the worst at the same time. And I wanted to truly honor God. Whether I passed or whether I lived, I wanted to honor God in whatever I did.
Praying for strength for her, for as good of a recovery as we could expect. You know, if things did not go as planned, you know, the grace to get through that, the strength to get through those outcomes. Dr. Perez comes out in 2 to 3 hours was the time frame, and we just all freeze, right, in the waiting room. Either something's really, really good or something's really, really bad.
So I woke up and I thought, well, I feel better than I thought I'd feel the first time, but I had only had like open heart. It was my first surgery. So I expected to feel a lot worse than I felt. So when Ray came in, he said, honey, you didn't get the transplant. And I was like, oh man, the heart was bad? And Ray said, no, honey, your heart is better. God healed your heart. You didn't need the transplant.
Moments after Melissa was put under, her anesthesiologist, Dr. Perez, decided to do one final test. What he saw, he couldn't explain.
I put the probe in, and what I see is a heart that is almost, but not quite, completely normal in its squeeze. I kept looking at this heart that was banging away virtually normally, and she's not on any supportive drugs at all. The surgeon looked at that heart, saw what I saw, and said, I can't give her a heart that works better than this.
The morning of my not transplant, I remember my surgeon coming in and he said, Melissa, we have no idea what made you sick and we have no idea what's made you better. And we said, we do. We knew.
Months later, the pump was removed. Today, after more than a decade, Melissa's heart is still going strong. And while it's not quite 100%, she's still able to be the active mother of 2 adopted boys and loving wife that God has called her to be.
It's still tough some days, but it's life. I still wake up in the morning and I say, thank you, God, for healing my heart.
Seeing Melissa today, over 10 years later, still with her own heart, living a normal life, it's just a privilege to have been a part of it.
We know miracles happen, right? We read about them in the Bible, but to see one, to see something so tangible happen was amazing.
I have a beautiful life, a very full life, and I have life, which is the best part.
And you can have that same life too, because that's what Jesus came to bring us. He came that we might have life and have it more abundantly. And when you tap into Him and what He has for you, then you get that abundant life. So Melissa did that. Everyone around her praying for her did that. And then you see the result.
Yeah, and I'm just reminded watching that story too, tell God what your desire is, no matter how big it might be. They were praying for her heart to be completely healed. And God did that so much so that she didn't even need a heart transplant anymore. The doctor goes, this is a great heart. You are healed. She came off the medication. She's, healed. It's just amazing. So I just think it's a good reminder for all of us. Make your request known to the Lord. No matter how big, how small, He wants to answer, and He will answer.